The evening lights of District 12 flickered like dying embers as the human foreigner named Rian stood at the base of the towering housing complex, clutching the faded payment slip that no longer meant anything, because the numbers on it had already condemned him long before he'd had the courage to face the truth. And the truth was simple and brutal. He could not pay his rent, and the law here did not bend for outsiders, especially not for humans, especially not after the last border. Conflict had left tensions trembling beneath every surface like a wound that refused to close. He took one hesitant breath, tasting the metallic cold of an alien world that never felt like home, and as he stepped forward, the ground shook, not violently but with the heavy rhythm of footsteps that didn't belong to any human frame. The kind of sound that rolled through bone and left the heart trembling in its cage, and Rian turned slowly, knowing exactly who he was about to face. She emerged from the shadows with the towering grace of someone who had been sculpted for war, for dominance, for enforcing the law carved into the foundations of her species, her silhouette massive against the glow of neon blue district lamps, her skin reflecting their light in shades of silver and obsidian, her eyes burning with an emotion Rian couldn't immediately decipher, anger perhaps, disappointment perhaps, or something deeper and more ancient, something carved into her very duty. "So you say you cannot pay your rent?" she rumbled, her voice low enough to vibrate the air around them, yet layered with something that wasn't cruelty, despite how her size and strength should have made this moment feel like an execution. And Rian felt his breath tighten as he forced himself not to look away, because if he looked away now, it would mean he accepted defeat, and humans were not known for surrendering easily, not even the ones who were far from their world with nothing left to bargain. He swallowed hard, wishing he could find a lie strong enough to hide behind. But there was no point, not with her, not with someone who could hear a human's heartbeat skip from across a room, not with someone trained to sense deception the way a soldier senses an incoming strike. And so he lifted his chin and said the truth, said it in a voice steady but trembling beneath the surface. "No, I can't." Her pupils narrowed in a slow, predatory focus, yet her shoulders shifted as if the answer pained her, as if she wanted him to have said something else, anything else, because enforcing the law always carried weight, especially on individuals like her who remembered the scars of the last war, who remembered watching humans fight with terrifying tenacity, who remembered a time when compassion had almost been outlawed for those tasked to uphold the rules. She stepped closer, the air heating around her as her massive frame blocked the artificial chill of the night breeze, and Rian felt the instinctive jolt of fear ripple through him, a primal reaction to being dwarfed by a being who could crush him with one hand. But she didn't raise her hand, didn't threaten, didn't remind him of the consequences he already knew too well. Instead, she studied him with a quiet dread that didn't belong in someone so physically powerful. "You knew the deadline," she said, but the words came softer now, as if spoken by someone caught between duty and something else she didn't want to name. "The law does not forgive debt." Her voice trembled at the last word, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't paying attention, but Rian noticed, because when a giant alien woman trembled, even for a heartbeat, you felt it in the soles of your feet, and he wondered why she hesitated, why she looked at him like he was more than just another human foreigner who had failed to meet the rules of her world. "I tried," he whispered, and though the words were small, they carried the weight of sleepless nights, rejected job applications, and the quiet humiliation of being a human in a district that tolerated his kind only because the peace treaties demanded it. "I really tried." Her expression tightened, as if she felt the truth of his struggle through the tremors of his voice. And something inside her shifted, a conflict he couldn't see but could feel in the air between them, heavy and trembling. "Trying does not change the law," she said, but her voice was no longer steady, no longer armored by procedure, and Rian saw something fragile flicker behind her fierce exterior. Something he didn't understand yet, something she didn't want him to understand. Not here, not now. Rian lowered his gaze to the cracked pavement beneath them, the weight of impending punishment settling on his shoulders like winter frost, and for a moment he felt utterly small, not because of her size but because of how hopeless everything had become, because humans were supposed to be strong, stubborn, unbreakable in spirit, but even the strongest spirit cracked when crushed between poverty and foreign law enforcement. But the silence did not end there, because she didn't turn away, didn't seize him, didn't declare the consequence written in the city's enforcement codes. Instead, she breathed slowly, deeply, as if gathering strength not for action but for restraint. "You should not face this alone," she murmured under her breath, a confession barely intended to be heard. But Rian heard it, and his heart lurched as if struck, because aliens of her rank were not supposed to say things like that, not supposed to care, not supposed to feel anything beyond the letter of their duty. He looked up sharply, searching her expression, and for the first time since arriving in this world, he saw something in an alien's eyes that mirrored the raw emotion in his own. Something human, something reluctant and fierce and painfully conflicted. Before he could speak, before he could ask what she meant, a distant rumble rolled across the sky, low like thunder but mechanical like engines older than any peace treaty, and she stiffened instantly, her gaze snapping upward with sudden dread, while Rian felt the vibration pulse through his chest. A sound like an awakening warship, a sound that would change everything, a sound that neither of them expected tonight, but one that carried the unmistakable message of fate tightening its grip around them both. The rumble grew louder as the sky dimmed beneath a shadow that did not belong to night, a slow-moving darkness that stretched across the upper atmosphere like the hand of something ancient reaching down to remind the world of forgotten power. And Rian felt each vibration travel through the soles of his feet, up his spine, into the center of his chest where fear and hope twisted together in a knot he could not name. The alien giantess turned fully toward the horizon, her breath catching in a way Rian had never imagined possible for someone of her strength. Her posture tightening as if readying for impact even though nothing had yet fallen, and the faint neon blues of District 12 flickered along the edges of her armor as she stepped in front of him instinctively, a protective gesture so subtle yet so impossible under the rules of her duty that Rian could hardly believe he'd seen it. "That sound?" she whispered, her voice a low tremor that felt as heavy as the warship's shadow. "It should not be here." Rian swallowed hard, watching the sky as streaks of deep crimson light shimmered over the clouds, their glow reflecting in her silver obsidian skin, painting her features with shifting colors that made her look almost ethereal, almost frightened, and he wondered what kind of force could make someone like her afraid. "What is it?" he breathed, trying to steady his voice though the tremor inside him shook harder with every passing second. She didn't answer immediately, and the silence between them swelled with tension. With unspoken memories she clearly didn't want to revisit, memories of battles fought in dark reaches of the galaxy, where humans and aliens had once torn each other apart, before uneasy peace settled like fragile glass between them. Finally she exhaled slowly, the air vibrating around her as she said, "A warship signature." Rian's heart skipped, breath catching in disbelief, because warships did not appear above civilian districts without warning. Not unless treaties had shattered or fates had shifted or someone far above them had decided that tonight would not end quietly. Her hand twitched, just slightly, as if resisting the urge to reach for him, and she forced her voice to remain steady though the edges softened with something unwilling to be concealed. "Human warship." Rian felt the world tilt beneath him as 1,000 memories surged at once. Not of battles he fought but of stories told by refugees, of whispered tales of ships that arrived only in times of desperation, in times when humans were cornered, hunted, or called home by forces stronger than their circumstances. He took a step forward unconsciously, drawn by the sight above them, by the sense that something greater than their rented dispute, greater than his debt and her duty, was threading itself through the night air, sewing their lives into a tapestry neither of them could escape. She noticed his step and shifted again, blocking him with a presence so enormous yet strangely gentle, a contradiction that made his breath falter, and her voice dropped lower as she murmured, "Stay behind me." The order wasn't harsh, wasn't commanding, instead it carried concern woven into every syllable, a concern she wasn't supposed to feel for a human, for a foreigner who owed rent and nothing more, and yet there it was, layered with fear she was trying to hide. "Why would a human warship come here?" Rian whispered, because the sky had already begun to glow brighter, the colors shifting into spirals of gold and crimson. Her eyes narrowed, as she studied the approaching silhouette, her jaw tightening in a way that revealed both anxiety and a strange protectiveness. "Warships do not travel without purpose," she said, "and they do not enter alien jurisdiction unless called." Rian stared at her, confusion twisting deeper, because he had called no one, had begged no one, had reached out to no one except the universe itself when he'd felt himself breaking under the weight of debt and loneliness. "I didn't call anyone," he whispered, but she didn't answer him, because the sky cracked open with a column of golden light that pierced through the clouds and struck down like a silent thunderbolt, spreading heat across the district as civilians paused in frozen awe or terror. The giantess stepped even closer to him, her presence a wall of living steel, her breath uneven now despite her attempts to contain it, and the air around them trembled like a heartbeat held between anticipation and dread. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a truth she did not want to accept. "If you did not call them," she said slowly, "then they came for their own reasons." Rian felt the words settle over him like a veil, heavy and suffocating, because he was just a tenant who couldn't pay rent, a foreigner living quietly in the lower districts, insignificant in the tides of galactic politics, and yet a warship hovered above them as if answering some unspoken summons buried within his fate. She lowered her gaze to him, and for the first time he saw her expression open, stripped of duty, revealing a mixture of worry, disbelief, and something deeper he didn't yet recognize. "No human warship crosses borders for nothing," she murmured. "Who are you, Rian?" His breath stumbled, because no one had ever asked that question with such intensity, with such suspicion and curiosity woven together, and he shook his head slowly, overwhelmed by the weight of her gaze. "I'm no one," he whispered, but the sky said otherwise. The warship said otherwise. Destiny said otherwise, and she stared at him as if she could hear fate calling his name louder than his own voice. The golden beam widened, illuminating them both, and in that light her massive hand finally lifted, not to seize him, not to enforce the law, but as if to shield him from whatever truth was about to descend upon their world, because something had begun tonight that neither human debt nor alien duty could contain, something that would pull them into a battle neither had chosen, a destiny shaped not by warships or laws but by the fragile thread binding their lives together. As the sky opened wider and fate reached for them both, the light pouring from the sky grew brighter until the district seemed carved from gold and fire, every metallic surface catching the glow and scattering it in blinding fragments across the streets. And Rian felt the air thicken as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting for something that had already begun long before either of them realized it. The giant alien woman shifted her stance, lowering herself slightly as if preparing for an attack or a landing she could not predict, her armor humming faintly with the reactive energy of her species' battle instincts. But beneath that hardened exterior something else trembled, a subtle quiver in her voice when she finally spoke. "This warship is not broadcasting hostility," she murmured, her eyes narrowing as the heat shimmered across the air between them. "But it carries authority, human authority, the kind that does not cross borders unless forced." Rian stared up at the silhouette descending through the light, its shape unlike the hulking vessels shown in historical footage, sleeker, almost ceremonial. Its wings curved like a blade ready to carve destinies apart, and for a fleeting moment Rian wondered if he was dreaming, because why would something so powerful come for someone who couldn't even afford rent? He stepped forward, unable to stop himself, drawn by a force he couldn't explain, but the giantess reacted instantly, her hands sweeping down in a protective arc that blocked him from the descending brightness, her warmth radiating through the air like a barrier meant for shielding not restraining, and he felt his breath catch at the closeness of her presence. "You should not be this near," she whispered, her voice low with worry she failed to hide. "Whatever reason they have for coming, humans do not summon warships for simple matters." Her words sank into him like a weight, because he knew that, everyone knew that, warships were symbols of intervention, symbols of status, symbols of power, and nothing about his life aligned with any of those things. "I'm not important," he said, his voice shaking with disbelief more than fear. "I don't know why they're here." Her gaze lingered on him, deep and searching, and the longer she studied him, the more something in her expression shifted. Not suspicion now, but a slow dawning realization that frightened her more than the descending vessel above them. "There is something you are not aware of," she said gently, the softness of her tone clashing with her immense, intimidating presence. "Some truth hidden from you, something buried so deep that even you do not know its gravity." Rian's chest tightened, confusion slicing through him, and before he could ask anything the warship's descent slowed, stabilizing in a column of golden energy that vibrated through the earth, shaking dust from windows and rippling across the ground like a heartbeat made of thunder. A platform extended from beneath the ship, lowering slowly, deliberately, and the alien woman's breath caught again as she recognized the design. "That is not military protocol," she whispered. "That is ceremonial." The word struck Rian's thoughts like lightning, a meaning he could not grasp but felt somewhere deep in the hollow spaces of his past, in the unanswered questions that had followed him since childhood, in the way certain officials had looked at him strangely during his travel approvals, in the way his name had triggered secondary checks at human ports even when he had nothing to hide. Ceremonial? For whom? Why? The giantess stepped even closer, her presence nearly enveloping him now, and the tremor in her voice grew sharper as she said, "Rian, you must think, you must remember if anyone ever spoke of your lineage, your origins, anything that might explain this." He shook his head, panic rising in him like cold water. "No one told me anything. I grew up like everyone else. I don't even know my parents' full histories. They never shared much. He stopped, because something flickered in his memory, a half-forgotten moment from childhood. His mother whispering to him in a shaking voice as she hid an ident chip inside a metal box she never opened again, telling him that one day others might come for him not because he was in danger, but because his life was tied to something he was too young to understand. He had forgotten it, buried it, never believed it mattered, until now. The giantess watched the shift in his expression, and her eyes widened. "You remembered something," she breathed, and the intensity in her tone made his pulse race. "Tell me." But the platform finally touched the ground with a soft ring that echoed like a chime of fate, silencing them both, and from its center a figure emerged, a human silhouette, cloaked in white gold fabric that caught the warship's light and turned it into a halo. A hush fell over the district, citizens peering from windows and doorways as the figure descended with slow, purposeful steps, and Rian felt the air constrict around him, because the figure moved not like a soldier, not like an envoy, but like someone who carried authority shaped by destiny itself. The alien giantess tensed, lowering herself slightly as if ready to fight or defend or shield him from something she could not predict, and Rian felt her concern wrap around him like invisible armor, more comforting than the manufactured safety of any treaty. The figure stopped several paces away, the air shimmering around them with the residual energy of the ship, and when they lifted their gaze to Rian, he felt a jolt of recognition that he could not explain, as if he had seen those eyes before in a forgotten dream. "Rian?" the figure said softly, voice carrying the weight of galaxies yet trembling with emotion. "I have come to bring you home." The words shattered the last remnants of his certainty, and the alien woman beside him straightened abruptly, her eyes wide with shock, with confusion, with a rising dread that had nothing to do with hostility and everything to do with prophecy written long before either of them were born. Rian's knees weakened, his breath shaking as he whispered, "Home." "Yes," the figure said, taking one slow step forward. "Your fate was never meant to remain hidden among foreign streets." The alien giantess moved instinctively, her massive hand lowering protectively in front of him again, her voice low and trembling. "Explain your claim." The figure's gaze flicked to her, not dismissive, not hostile, but with a quiet respect, as if they understood the depth of her emotions better than she realized. "Because," the figure said gently, "human or alien, law or battle, destiny binds him to more than either of your worlds know." The air grew still, charged with mystery and fear and something unbearably tender, as the truth hovered between them like a star waiting to collapse into revelation. The warship's glow dimmed into a softer pulse, a rhythm that felt almost like breathing, and the district around them fell into a hush so deep that even the wind refused to disturb it, as if the universe itself leaned closer to witness the unfolding truth, and Rian stood frozen between the giant alien woman who shielded him with trembling strength and the mysterious human figure who claimed him with a voice full of destiny. The golden-cloaked envoy took another slow step forward, their eyes lingering not on Rian first but on the alien giantess, and Rian noticed the faint crease of sorrow carving into the envoy's expression, a silent recognition that made the air twist with tension. "You have protected him?" the envoy said gently, their words carrying an unexpected warmth. "More fiercely than your law would ever require." The alien woman stiffened, her jaw locking as if fighting an emotion she refused to show, and Rian felt the tremor ripple through her massive frame. Not of fear but of conflict, a battle between her duty and something deeper that had begun long before tonight. "I protect civilians," she said, her voice steady but the edges softer than she intended. "Even human ones." The envoy's gaze softened further, almost painfully. "No," they said quietly. "You protected him because your fate is tied to his." The words struck the giantess like a blow, her breath faltering as she stepped slightly back, as if afraid the world might see too clearly through the armor she had worn for so long. And Rian's heart lurched because he felt it too, that invisible thread tugging between them since the moment she first confronted him outside the housing complex, before he could speak, before she could deny or accept the envoy's claim. The sky flickered again, the warship humming with a deeper, sharper tone, and the envoy turned toward Rian with a gravity that made his legs tremble. "There is a truth your family hid from you," the envoy began, and the district lights dimmed as if giving the moment its own shadow. "A truth that could reignite old wars or forge a new alliance." Rian felt the world tilt, his vision blurring at the corners. "What truth?" he whispered. The envoy lifted a hand, revealing a small metallic emblem, curved, ancient, marked with a symbol Rian had never seen before but somehow recognized in the bones of his memory, as though it slept beneath the surface of every dream he had ever forgotten. "This," the envoy said softly, "belongs to the lost heir of the Terran's sovereign line." Rian's heartbeat stopped, his breath collapsing inward as the words sank into him. Heavy and impossible. "Her sovereign line?" He stepped back involuntarily, shaking his head. No, I'm not anyone." But the envoy's gaze held him steady, unwavering. "Your parents fled after an attempted coup," they said, their voice thick with history. "They hid you among civilians to protect you from factions who wanted the heir dead." Rian's vision swirled, memories slamming into him. His mother's fearful whispers, his father's insistence that he never remove the small metal box from the floorboards, the strange checks at human borders, the inexplicable moments where officials had looked at him with hidden recognition. The alien giantess slowly lowered herself, shock rippling through her massive frame as she stared at the emblem, then at Rian, then back again. "This cannot be true," she whispered, her voice stripped of authority, of certainty. "If he were heir, the galaxy would have known." "No," the envoy replied. "His identity was erased to save him, even from allies." Rian felt faint, the world spinning as if trying to reshape everything he'd ever known. But before he could fully absorb the revelation, another tremor surged through the ground, harsher this time, violent enough that buildings rattled and debris flickered across the pavement. The envoy stiffened, head snapping toward the far sky as a new shadow streaked through the upper atmosphere, its trail like a blade of burning red slicing across the night. "No," the envoy breathed, their composure cracking for the first time. "They found him." The alien giantess reacted instantly, her massive hand dropping protectively around Rian, her body turning into a living shield with instinctive ferocity, and her voice rose in a growl that vibrated through the ground. "Identify that vessel." The envoy's voice trembled. "Not human." Rian looked up as the crimson shadow split into multiple fragments, each one spiraling like hunting predators diving toward them, and a cold dread wrapped around his spine. The alien woman shifted, her armor igniting with deep blue energy as her battle instincts erupted. The protective calm in her eyes replaced by something fierce, ancient, unstoppable, and Rian felt a surge of awe and terror as she took a step forward, positioning herself fully between him and the incoming threat. "They are coming for the heir," the envoy said shakily. "A faction that seeks to control the throne by erasing the last bloodline." Rian staggered backward, shaking. "No, I'm not. I don't want. I never asked for this." The alien giantess turned slightly toward him, and for the first time since he met her, her expression softened completely, stripped of law, stripped of duty, revealing something raw and painfully vulnerable beneath her warrior exterior. "You may not want this," she murmured, her voice trembling in a way that made his chest ache. But destiny does not wait for permission. Another explosion thundered across the sky as the crimson vessels descended, weapons charging, and Rian saw in her eyes a fierce decision being made in real time. A decision that broke every law she had sworn to uphold. A decision that bound her fate to his with a force more powerful than fear. She reached for him, her massive hand warm and steady as she lowered it for him to climb onto, her gaze burning with a promise she had no right to make. "I will not let them take you," she said, voice deep with certainty that shook the ground. "Not while I still breathe." And as the first enemy ship broke through the clouds with a scream of fire and metal, Rian understood the twist he could never have predicted. She was not just his enforcer, not just a giant alien bound by law. She was part of the prophecy that hid him, sworn, by her people's ancient oath, to protect the lost human heir with her life, even if it meant becoming a traitor to her own world. The first enemy ship tore through the clouds like a spear of burning red metal, its engines screaming in a pitch that rattled windows and sent civilians running for cover, and the district lights flickered violently as if the entire city shuddered beneath the force of something far larger than its borders could contain. And Rian felt the air turn sharp and electric, thick with danger that reached far beyond him, far beyond this place, straight into the fragile balance holding the galaxy. Together, the giant alien woman braced herself in front of him, her enormous frame absorbing the tremors of the approaching assault, blue energy crackling across her armor like lightning racing across storm clouds, and Rian could feel her determination pulsing in the air around them. A living force that wrapped him in warmth even as the temperature dropped with the pressure of descending enemies. The envoy stepped closer, the golden cloak whipping wildly in the rising wind as they raised a device emitting a faint shimmering barrier around the three of them. But even that shield flickered with strain under the hostile energy pouring from above, and the envoy's voice trembled with a warning that carried the weight of entire star systems. "This attack is more than an assassination," they said, their words almost lost to the roar of engines. "If they take the air or kill him, every faction loyal to the throne will respond, and the galaxy will fracture." Rian's pulse stuttered, his body shaking not just from fear but from the crushing realization that his existence, something he had always believed so small and insignificant, was enough to ignite wars across worlds he had never even seen. "I don't want this," he whispered, voice broken by disbelief. "I never wanted any of this." The giantess turned slightly, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that steadied him even as the sky collapsed around them. And her voice came low and fierce, filled with the kind of conviction born only from ancient vows and unbreakable oaths. "Want has nothing to do with destiny," she said, her breath warm against the cold wind. "But you are not facing this alone." Before Rian could answer, the first enemy ship unleashed a streak of red plasma toward the ground, and the alien woman surged forward with a speed impossible for her size, slamming her armored arm into the pavement and generating a shockwave that split the projectile before it could reach them, the blast rippling outward in a fiery arc that lit the district in crimson light. The envoy shouted something into their comm, their voice strained. "We need extraction now. Enemy vessels are breaching controlled airspace. Activate sovereign protocol." But the warship above them pulsed erratically, its engines struggling under interference from the approaching fleet, and Rian felt dread coil tighter as more enemy silhouettes dropped through the clouds, each one humming with lethal purpose. The alien giantess lowered her hand again, urging him to climb onto her palm, her eyes burning with protective fury. "We must move," she said, voice vibrating through the air. "This ground will not hold once the full barrage begins." Rian hesitated only a moment before stepping onto her hand, the warmth of her skin grounding him even as fear clawed at his lungs, and she lifted him with incredible gentleness, securing him against her shoulder armor where she could shield him with her entire body. The district thundered with another explosion as a second plasma blast struck a nearby tower, the shockwave sending fire and debris spiraling through the air, and the alien woman sprinted across the street with a force that cracked the pavement beneath her feet, every motion a perfect blend of power and desperation. As she ran, the envoy raced beside her, cloak snapping like a golden flame, their voice rising urgently. "If the heir is captured, rebel factions will claim legitimacy and overthrow the council. Every alliance between humans and alien worlds will collapse. Rian clung to the alien woman's armor, his heart pounding as the magnitude of what he was hearing crashed over him. Because this wasn't just about him surviving, it wasn't even about one warship and one district. It was about entire civilizations standing on the edge of shattering into chaos. "Why me?" he whispered, the wind tearing at his voice. "Why would everything fall apart because of me?" The alien woman answered without hesitation, her voice deep and unwavering even as she dodged falling debris and incoming fire. "Because the sovereign line was the only force strong enough to keep the galaxy from tearing itself apart," she said. "You are the last of that line. Your presence is a stabilizing force, and your death would be a declaration of open war." The words hit him harder than the explosions around them, and Rian felt something inside him shift, a mixture of fear and unwilling responsibility twisting together until it burned like a brand in his chest. The sky tore again as 3 crimson ships dove toward them in formation, their weapons charging with a pitch that resonated with lethal finality, and the envoy shouted, "Incoming!" But the alien giantess didn't slow, didn't falter, didn't hesitate, her armor flaring with brilliant blue light as she pivoted sharply and raised her free arm, releasing a pulse of defensive energy that clashed with the incoming blasts, scattering them into shattered arcs of red sparks. Rian felt the shockwave ripple through her body and into his own bones, but she stood firm, her stance widening as the ground cracked beneath her, and she growled with a sound so deep and powerful it felt like the voice of an ancient warrior echoing across time. "They will not have you," she vowed, every word vibrating with emotion she could no longer hide. A massive explosion rocked the air behind them as another enemy ship struck the district square, sending civilians screaming and alarms blaring through the chaos. And the envoy finally received a response through their comm, the static clearing just enough for 3 words to break through. "Extraction window open." The envoy looked up at Rian, their expression urgent, desperate, haunted. "If we fail to reach the corridor in time, none of us will survive, and the galaxy will burn." The alien woman tightened her grip around Rian protectively, her muscles coiling with unyielding resolve as she turned toward the distant beacon forming ahead. "Hold on," she murmured, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and something deeper, something painfully tender. "Your destiny begins now." And behind them, the first enemy ship landed, troops pouring out like shadows, ready to claim a throne by blood. As the galaxy's fragile peace trembled on the brink of its final breath, the extraction beacon pulsed faintly through the smoke-choked horizon, a trembling column of pale blue light fighting to stay alive against the crimson storm tearing the sky apart, and the alien giantess ran toward it with a force that shook the ground beneath every step, her massive form illuminated by explosions that flashed like broken stars across the district, her breath harsh and fierce as she shielded Rian with her entire body. Rian clung to her armor, feeling each vibration of her muscles as she moved, each tremor of strain as the enemy fleet closed in around them, and he could not form words, could not shape the storm of fear and disbelief swirling inside him. Not when the fate of entire worlds suddenly rested on the shaking hands of someone who had once worried only about rent. Not when every heartbeat felt like it carried the weight of history itself. Below them, the envoy sprinted through collapsing streets, their golden cloak shredded by debris, their device flickering as it struggled to maintain the protective barrier that shielded their path. And though their breath came rough and desperate, their voice still carried the strength of someone fighting for more than survival. "We're losing time," they shouted, dodging a collapsing beam as fire hissed across the pavement. "The enemy is deploying ground units. If they reach the beacon first, the corridor will close." Rian looked ahead, the blue beacon flickering between bursts of smoke and falling metal, and the dread inside him sharpened, because the beacon wasn't just far. It was fading, dying under the strain of the battlefield forming around it. The alien woman felt his fear, sensed it through the tremble of his fingers against her armor, and she tilted her head slightly, her voice deep and steady even as she gasped for breath. "Stay with me," she murmured. "I will get you there." But even her confidence trembled at the edges, because the enemy ship on their left broke formation suddenly, swooping low with a shriek of engines that sent a blast of wind and heat rolling over them, its weapons locking onto them with fatal precision. The alien giantess twisted sharply, curling her arm around Rian and dropping into a slide that tore through the shattered pavement as the ship unleashed a barrage of plasma fire, each blast detonating inches away from her body, showering them in sparks and molten debris, and Rian felt her body jolt with each impact she absorbed, her protective instincts overriding her own safety. She didn't scream, didn't falter, didn't break. She simply pushed herself back onto her feet and kept running. Even as smoke curled from scorched plates of her armor, Rian felt tears burning in his eyes, the air thick and hot around him, and he whispered hoarsely, "You're going to get yourself killed." Her breath hitched, a tremor rippling through her voice. "I am sworn to die before you do." He shook his head violently, emotion cracking through him like lightning. "I don't want that. I never wanted anyone to die for me." She slowed for one heartbeat, just one, her massive hand tightening gently around him as she whispered, "And I never wanted to care." The confession struck deeper than any explosion, and Rian felt something shift inside him, something raw and aching, something that made the chaos around them dim for a single breath. But the moment shattered as another squad of Crimson ships descended, deploying soldiers in black armored exosuits that landed with ground-splitting force, their visors glowing with targeting data as they aimed directly at Rian. "Target acquired," one of them announced, their voice mechanical and cold. "Retrieve the heir. Kill the protector." The alien woman snarled, a deep, primal sound that vibrated through her chest and into Rian's bones, and she lunged forward with a speed that defied her size, swinging her free arm in a devastating arc that slammed into the nearest soldier, hurling them across the street with enough force to crumple metal. The envoy raised their device, summoning a wave of shimmering energy that deflected incoming fire. But even they were weakening, their knees buckling slightly as the strain intensified. "Go," they gasped. "The beacon is opening. We cannot hold them much longer." The alien woman surged forward again, but Rian felt each breath of hers becoming more ragged, each movement slower, each step heavier with the toll of protecting him against an enemy designed to kill even her kind. More enemy soldiers landed from the sky, surrounding them in a tightening circle of glowing red visors and raised weapons, and the alien woman stopped abruptly, positioning herself as a living wall around Rian, her entire body shaking from exertion, yet standing tall, fierce, unbroken. Rian clutched her armor, terror closing around his heart like a fist, because she couldn't fight all of them. Not alone, not after absorbing so many hits, not without dying. And he couldn't let that happen. Not to her, not after everything she had done, everything she had broken law and duty to protect. The envoy raised their voice, filled with urgency and sorrow. "Rian, this is the moment. If you do not claim your lineage, she will die for you in vain." Rian's breath caught, his chest burning, because he didn't feel like a ruler, didn't feel like anyone who belonged to a throne or a lineage. He felt like a terrified man clinging to a warrior who should never have been forced to protect him. "I can't," he gasped. "I don't even know how." But the envoy answered with a trembling whisper, "Blood remembers." The soldiers closed in, weapons humming with lethal charge, and the alien woman dropped into a final stance, every muscle coiled to protect him even if it meant her last breath. And in that instant, as he felt her shaking beneath the weight of every hit she had taken for him, Rian felt something ignite inside his chest, a burning pressure that spread like fire through his veins, a pulse that matched the rhythm of the flickering beacon, deep, ancient, sovereign. The air around him shivered, reality bending subtly as a force he had never known twisted awake beneath his skin. The nearest soldier hesitated, visor glitching as if detecting something impossible. The alien woman turned her head slightly, her voice breaking with shock and relief. "Rian, your eyes," and the envoy whispered, tears shining in their gaze. "The air awakens." The ground cracked beneath them as a wave of invisible energy burst outward from Rian's body, flickering like starlight torn from the heart of a dying sun. Every soldier stumbled back, their targeting systems malfunctioning, their weapons glitching, and the sky itself seemed to pulse in recognition of the power stirring within him. And in the middle of that storm, Rian realized the truth he could no longer escape. He did not choose this destiny, but it had chosen him, and the galaxy would not survive unless he embraced it, no matter the cost, no matter the danger, no matter the blood that would be spilled before. The final battle dawned, because this was only the beginning, and the climax of fate had already begun to unfold around them, in fire, in fear, and in the fragile bond between a lost heir and the alien warrior sworn to die for him. The surge of energy radiating from Rian washed across the battlefield like the silent roar of a newborn star, bending light, bending air, bending fate itself as the soldiers surrounding them staggered backward, their glowing visors flickering with confused alarms, their weapons lowering involuntarily under the pressure of something far older, far deeper than their mission allowed them to comprehend. The alien giantess, still braced in front of him, felt the tremor of his awakening pulse through her armor and into her bones, and she lowered herself instinctively, not in fear but in reverence, her breath shuddering out of her as ancient instincts, long buried in her people, rose like ghosts within her chest. She had sworn to protect him before she even knew his truth, but now the truth poured out of him like light breaking through thousands of years of shadow. And in that light she saw her purpose not as a failure of law but as the fulfillment of an oath written into her species' history long before she was born. Rian held her shoulder for balance as the force continued to surge, but even his power crackled through his veins. His voice trembled with vulnerability, with fear, with the fragile humanity that lived beneath the destiny awakening inside him. "I don't know what to do," he whispered, his words breaking apart in the chaos. "I don't know how to be what they want." The giantess turned her head slowly, her massive eyes glowing softly as they met his, and in that gaze he saw no fear, no doubt, only loyalty, fierce and unshakable. "You do not have to know," she murmured, her voice a deep tremor that wrapped around him like a shield. "You only have to choose." The envoy stepped closer, breathless and awestruck, their golden cloak rippling in the shifting energy. "Your lineage's power responds to intention," they said, eyes shining. "Your will shapes it, your heart directs it. Your destiny is not commanded by blood alone, but by what you decide to stand for." Rian exhaled slowly, the fear inside him battling with rising determination, and as the last of the enemy shockwave dissipated, the soldiers surrounding them steadied themselves, their hesitation replaced by renewed focus as their leader stepped forward. A tall figure in obsidian armor with a crimson visor that gleamed like a razor's edge, their voice cutting through the air with cold precision. "The air is destabilizing the region," they declared. "If he escapes through the corridor, the sovereign line will rise again, and the galaxy will fall into war." The alien giantess growled, stepping forward protectively, but the envoy lifted a hand, their voice steady and sharp. "The galaxy is already on the brink, because your faction seeks power through fear." But the commander ignored them, their visor locking onto Rian, red warnings flaring across the surface. "Eliminate the protector," they ordered. "Extract the heir." Before the troops could act, the alien woman shifted, lifting Rian higher, holding him near the protective plates of her collar as she widened her stance, her voice erupting in a fierce vow. "You will not touch him." The soldiers surged forward as one, crimson lights blazing, their weapons charging with lethal energy, and Rian felt the moment snap, the final thread between retreat and destiny tearing open like a wound. He didn't think, didn't plan, didn't search for control, he simply felt. He felt the giantess's heartbeat pounding beneath him, steady despite her wounds. He felt the envoy's fear mixed with hope. He felt the weight of every life that could be destroyed if he surrendered now. He felt the truth of who he had been and who he could become entwining like two halves of a star collapsing into rebirth. His hand lifted, trembling, and the energy inside him surged toward the soldiers like a tidal wave rising to meet a storm. But it didn't explode outward. No, it grew upward, into a shimmering dome of pulsing starlight that expanded from his chest and enclosed the three of them in a celestial barrier. The enemy fire struck the barrier and dissolved into harmless sparks, scattering across the pavement like dying embers, and the soldiers froze as their weapons overloaded, their systems malfunctioning. The commander stepped back, for the first time uncertain. "This is impossible." The envoy stared in awe, whispering, "No, this is sovereignty." The giantess felt the pulse of the barrier like a heartbeat against her skin, and her eyes softened with something that blended devotion and pride. She looked up at him, tiny, fragile, glowing like a dawn breaking through darkness, and said, "Your people will follow you." Rian shook with the weight of the moment, but he held her gaze, held the envoy's hope, held the trembling edge of his own fear, and whispered, "I don't want a throne built on fear." The energy around them brightened, shifting from violent light into something warm, protective, alive. "I want peace," he said, voice low but steady. "A peace that no one has to run from." The barrier flared, reacting to his words, shaping itself around his intent, and the envoy nodded with fierce relief. "Then that is the path your lineage will carve." The soldiers hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks, their commander raising a hand to order another assault. But the warship above roared back to life, its engines stabilizing now that Rian's awakening had cleared the interference, and a beam of shimmering blue dropped from its center, widening into the extraction corridor. "Now," the envoy urged, "this is your only chance." The alien woman gently lifted him toward the light, her hand trembling beneath him as if she feared letting go, and Rian reached out, placing his palm against her cheek where warm silver skin met the glow of his power. "Come with me," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. Her eyes widened, ancient rules and ancient loyalties battling inside her. And for a breath she looked torn between two worlds, but then she bowed her head slightly, touching her forehead gently to his, a gesture of her people reserved for sacred vows, and whispered, "My destiny is with you." She stepped into the beam, carrying him with her, the envoy leaping in beside them as the corridor flared to life. Behind them, the district faded into swirling light. Before them, a fractured galaxy awaited its heir. And as the corridor lifted them toward the warship, Rian felt the weight of destiny settle on his shoulders. Not as a burden, but as a promise he would fight to keep, a promise she would die or live to protect, a promise that might finally heal the wounds carved between human and alien stars. And as the beam closed around them, sealing the path to a new future, the giantess whispered the words that would define their journey. "We shape fate together." And the galaxy, trembling on the brink of war, felt the first breath of hope in generations, as the lost heir rose with his protector beside him, ready to reclaim a destiny written in fire, fear, and unwavering love.